Welcome to this explainer. Okay, I want you to just pause and imagine the ultimate modern fantasy for a second. Picture a life completely 100% free of stress. We're talking a perfectly curated bubble. Your Wi-Fi literally never drops, you never have to sit in agonizing gridlock traffic, and your morning coffee is somehow always the exact right temperature. We are told every single day to reduce our stress, right? To avoid discomfort at all costs, and to seek this state of perfect, uninterrupted tranquility. But what if achieving that zero-stress life was actually a biological nightmare? Today, we are going to completely flip the script on how you view stress and explore why removing it might actually be the most dangerous thing you could possibly do.
Seriously, think about it. What actually happens if you engineer all the struggle right out of your life? Imagine this perfectly sanitized, completely temperature-controlled existence. You never feel too hot, you never feel too cold, you never have to lift anything heavy. You protect your kids so intensely that they never face a single hardship, they never have to make a tough decision, and they never even scrape a knee. I mean, it sounds like absolute paradise, doesn't it? But medically and biologically speaking, it is a total trap. This relentless pursuit of perfect comfort actually sets off a cascade of systemic failures right inside the human body.
So let's really dive into this. The author Nassim Nicholas Taleb actually coined a brilliant term for this whole phenomenon. He calls it anti-fragility. Think about human bones for a second. They actually get stronger when they're subjected to stress and tension. Human systems, and by that I mean our bodies, our immune systems, even our minds, they don't just casually tolerate stress, they actively require it to flourish. When things that are anti-fragile are suddenly deprived of volatility, turmoil, and friction, they don't just comfortably stay the same, they actively weaken.
And that brings us to a really fascinating and honestly rarely discussed medical concept called eustress. Now, we all know about distress, right? That's the bad, overwhelming stress that burns us out and keeps us up at night. But eustress? That is the pathology of inadequate stress. It's essentially a state of severe environmental deprivation. And here is the massive twist that almost all modern wellness advice completely misses. A total lack of environmental friction actively causes our structural and immunological defenses to decay. Our bodies literally forget how to protect themselves when there is absolutely nothing left to fight against.
You might have heard of the famous Biosphere 2 project. Scientists grew these absolutely beautiful trees inside a perfect, artificially controlled dome. But there was a huge problem. They kept falling over. Why? Because there was no wind. Without the mechanical stress of the wind blowing against them, those trees never developed strong root foundations or dense wood, and so they simply collapsed under their own weight. And we see the exact same thing happen in space. Without the constant, invisible stress of Earth's gravity pulling them down, astronauts rapidly lose bone mineral density and they suffer from intense cardiovascular deconditioning. If you don't use it, you quite literally lose it.
And hey, this doesn't just apply to trees and bones, it applies incredibly powerfully to human brain development too. Your prefrontal cortex, that is your brain's executive control center for complex decision-making and impulse control, well, it doesn't actually fully mature until your mid-20s, and it desperately needs practice to get there. When we see extreme helicopter parenting, where well-intentioned parents step in to prevent any sort of discomfort and make every single decision for their kids, they're actually removing necessary psychological struggle. The prefrontal cortex basically never gets the practice reps it needs to mature. So ironically, protecting children from all stress actually leaves them completely vulnerable to stress when they inevitably have to face the real world.
Now, if you take this to the absolute extreme and remove all stimuli, the results are actually kind of terrifying. Studies looking at prolonged sensory deprivation reveal that brains deprived of sensory stress actually begin to hallucinate and atrophy. The mammalian brain needs continuous, patterned sensory inputs just to maintain synaptic stability. If you sever those inputs, the brain's delicate excitatory-inhibitory balance gets totally thrown off. It literally starts misidentifying its own internal neural noise as external reality. This proves, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that neural growth absolutely demands environmental challenge.
Psychologists actually map this whole thing out using something called the Yerkes-Dodson law, basically splitting the stress spectrum into 3 distinct buckets. On one far end of the spectrum, we have eustress, that underload of stress we just talked about, resulting in decay, atrophy, and fragility. On the other extreme, we have distress, the overload of stress that results in damage, disease, and breakdown. But right there in the middle, that is the sweet spot. That's eustress, which is also known as hormesis. This is that optimal, magical level of stress that triggers growth, resilience, and biological adaptation.
So let's really zoom in on that sweet spot because it holds the key to some incredible health benefits. Hormesis is, honestly, practically a medical superpower. It is the biological principle where low, controlled doses of stress stimulate adaptation, cellular repair, and resilience. You can think of it as the ultimate medical cure for our modern epidemic of fragility. It's just like lifting weights, right? Lifting causes tiny micro tears in your muscles, but then they heal back stronger. In the exact same way, introducing a little bit of targeted stress teaches your entire biological system how to upgrade its own armor.
So what does that biological upgrade actually look like under the hood? It is genuinely fascinating. These tiny controlled challenges trigger this incredible anti-inflammatory cascade inside your body. First, they activate heat shock proteins. You can think of them as tiny little mechanics rushing in to repair damaged cells. It also kicks off autophagy, which is your body's natural cellular cleanup process. It basically takes out the cellular trash. It strengthens your mitochondria, giving you a much better baseline of energy. And it increases BDNF, a super crucial protein for neuroplasticity, memory, and learning. You are actively building biological shields.
All right, so how do we actually get these benefits in our daily lives? Well, one of the best ways is by harnessing the power of temperature. Modern humans, we basically live in perfectly climate-controlled boxes. But by briefly stepping out of that comfort zone, we can trigger hormesis. A brief exposure to heat, like sitting in a sauna, raises your core body temperature slightly, which dramatically improves cardiovascular health and blood vessel function. And then on the flip side, we have cold exposure. Think about finishing your warm shower with just 30 seconds of freezing cold water. Yes, it's absolutely terrible in the moment, for sure, but it creates this brief, invigorating shock that massively trains your nervous system to stay calm under pressure, enhances dopamine release, and improves circulation. And of course, we absolutely cannot ignore the most fundamental stressor of all, exercise. Exercise is pretty much the ultimate form of structural and mental hormesis. When you voluntarily subject your body to the physical stress of working out, it acts as a really powerful interoceptive exposure. It forces your entire cardiovascular system to adapt, it boosts your bone mineral density to help prevent osteoporosis, and it actually restores cognitive function. And this is why it matters so much. By teaching your body how to safely navigate a heightened heart rate and physical exertion, it actively buffers your brain against everyday psychological anxiety.
Now, a quick warning here. Hormesis is a precision tool, and more stress does not automatically equal more benefit. To use it safely, you just need to remember 3 simple things. First, keep the duration short. A few minutes in the cold or the heat is plenty. Second, prioritize adequate recovery. The real magic actually happens during the rest period, when your body is adapting and growing stronger. And third, you have to listen to your body. You should never, ever push through sharp pain or exhaustion. The goal here is a brief, stimulating challenge, not chronic, damaging distress.
Which leaves us with a pretty vital question to ponder as we wrap up. Are you protecting yourself from stress, or are you just making yourself fragile? In our modern rush to build this perfectly comfortable, completely frictionless world, we've accidentally starved our bodies and our brains of the very struggles they actually need to survive and thrive. It really is time to rethink our relationship with discomfort. Go take that slightly colder shower. Push yourself to learn that incredibly difficult new skill. Reintroduce safe, good stress back into your daily routine and just watch how incredibly resilient you were built to be. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer.